I'm really happy to see you and to know that you're interested, or at least curious about Jewish Renewal and why it's of interest to me. And I think it's a really great conversation we're likely to have. Um, there are probably 1,000 ways to go about presenting it. I'm going to do my best, and there probably are 999 other ways that might have been better, but here we go. At least we have 3 sessions, starting tonight and then the following 2 Wednesdays, so that, I'll be interested in your feedback if there's something more that you want to hear or do. I would have gone around to ask everybody to introduce themselves and say something like, what exposure have you had, Noel? But just with 18 people, and I think there might be one or two more joining us, that might take longer than we need. So I would invite you to type something in the chat if you could, like tell us, and then I can review the chat later. What exposure have you had to Jewish Renewal? Some of you, it's been extensive, so you don't have to go into all the history of it, but just give me a hint. Maybe some of the others on the call would be interested to know. I know Elizabeth Ross, who's just joining us. She had some experience with the Siegel brothers many years ago. I know Aryeh and Wendy know them or knew them. And so it's even possible that I think Jose might consider himself a Jewish renewal rabbi. So there are definitely renewal influences in our community, probably more than we even know. I know that Kathy's joining us on the phone, so I'm going to mute her audio and we'll move right along. So I want to offer a prayerful intention, what I would call what's called a kavanah. And a kavanah, so not so much a prayer, but what I hope to accomplish in our meeting and conversation tonight and in the next few weeks. I hope and pray that this is a process of discernment, mostly for me, but for each one of you as individuals and all of us as a community, to that we might learn more about Jewish Renewal, the Jewish Renewal movement, and what it represents and what it would mean for us to consider ourselves a Jewish Renewal community. Now, I was contemplating that, over the past few days, and it occurred to me a more immediate and more important question would be, what would it mean for me to identify or consider myself as a Jewish Renewal rabbi? I'm not sure I really consider that question seriously, but I have to do so now because I've been reading a lot more lately and really finding, especially from this book that Paulette and Philip have been reading, Living in the Presence by Rabbi Bert Jacobson. I find that I identify so strongly with his search and with what he's found in the course of his spiritual search and in the conclusions he's made and his theology, which he's articulated so beautifully. It's a long book, so I recommend it only if you're willing to make the investment of time in that. But I realize that I think it would be fair for me to consider myself a Jewish Renewal rabbi. And I really have to fully understand what that means. And so it so happens that I found out there was a conference for Jewish Renewal rabbis happening like at the end of this week. And I thought, you know what? I should probably go to that if I'm really serious about this. Now, I had been to the conference 5 years ago in Denver, and then 2 years before that. So I know a lot of Jewish rabbis, and I kind of know what it's like there. But to really see myself as a member of that community seems at this point in my life like it would be very important. So I was able to sign up, even though it was past the registration deadline, and I'm going. There's like a whole, Shabbaton and everything, but the actual conference starts on Sunday night. So after our family circle on Sunday morning, I'm going to jump on a plane and be there for the opening session. And then it goes through through Wednesday night of next week. So next class we'll do by Zoom, but I'll be in Denver. But, I'll be very close to the source there, and may have some colleagues to join me. Although I think it's at the same time that their closing session is happening, so I might have to miss part of that or whatever. We'll figure it out. But I want to say that this has been a really important journey for me, and I'm really pleased to report that I take it seriously enough not to just recommend it for you, but to really take that step myself. Now, you might wonder, what is Jewish renewal? So I have a few ways of describing that. But first, Jewish renewal is not just a topic of discussion. It's not just an intellectual subject that one could teach in an academic setting. I mean, it's that too. But there's really some heart and soul to it as well. So I think it would be appropriate for us to do a nigun, to begin with a nigun. And I was thinking, because of my voice and because we're not here together, it might be better to have Reb Zalman himself sing a nigun for us. So I'm going to share my screen and optimize for video here. And let's see. And we'll take just a minute to hear from Reb Zalman, and then we'll get into the subject matter. Here we go.
So we have all kinds of resources. It's good to learn nigunim, because if you sing some of those melodies before you go into davening, many people think that you need only verbal prayer, but every time you sing a nigun and you go to a higher point in the nigun, and it doesn't have to be a fancy nigun, join me for a moment. I'm going to take the melody of Havurah Nagila, but slow, very slow. Yai dai 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 dai, hai dai 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 dai, hai dai, yai dai dai, yai di da da dai, hai dai, hai da dai, hai dai. Da 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 ya da da ri da 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 ya da 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 ya da 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 hai da 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 hai di da 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 hai da 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 I da 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 I da 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 I da 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 I plead with you, Ribbon Shalom, be with me. In my life it would be so good to know you with me. Ay, 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 ay. Halavai, may it be so. Ay, ya, da, 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 da. So you see what I mean? A nigun is a prayer in itself if you know the right kind of nigunim. And I'm not talking about yeshiva rock right now. So all this is really important.
Okay, wasn't that sweet? So the Jewish Renewal movement was founded largely thanks, in a significant way. It was founded by Reb Zalman and his colleagues and friends and students, and it's grown. I don't know how many thousands of people now identify themselves as members of the Jewish Renewal movement. But I'll tell you that there are 5 Jewish Renewal communities in the Bay Area, and I'll share that list with you if you can see that. There's 3 in Berkeley, not surprising, 1 in Oakland, and 1 in Santa Cruz. In fact, Chokhmat Halev is the congregation where Jose and Julie went after they left CJC. Let's see, I think Aryeh and Wendy were very involved in the Aquarian Minyan. Rabbi Bert founded Kehila Community Synagogue, and Hadash Yameinu in Santa Cruz is led by Rabbi Eli Cohen, who's a colleague and friend. So, what exactly is Jewish renewal? Here's a good description. Let's take a look at this. I'm gonna just show this play from current slide. Okay. It's a trans-denominational approach to revitalizing Judaism. We combine the socially progressive values of egalitarianism, the joy of Hasidism, the informed do-it-yourself spirit of the Havurah movement, and the accumulated wisdom of centuries of tradition. We value deep ecumenism. In Hillel's words, we learn from every person and spiritual tradition. We create innovative, accessible, and welcoming prayer experiences. We shape halakha, Jewish law, into a living way of walking in the world. And we seek to deepen the ongoing, joyful, and fundamental connection with the God who connects us all, which is at the heart of Jewish practice. Renewal is an attitude, not a denomination, and offers tools to all branches of Judaism, including, and this is how it might differ from Chabad and other forms of Hasidism, an emphasis on accessible spiritual experience, contemplative practices. Jewish renewal teachers were the first to recover meditative practices from the dusty attic of Jewish tradition and to return them to their rightful place as central Jewish spiritual technologies. Davanology, a term that Reb Zalman coined, the art and practice of being a living laboratory for creative and renewed Jewish prayer in modalities including chant and embodied prayer. Saging, trainings, and tools for rethinking aging as a journey of unearthing wisdom. Hashba'ah, spiritual direction, as a tool for unpacking the holy potential of every moment and for discerning the voice of God. Renewal seeks to balance forward thinking with backward compatibility. We know we can't drive if we're only looking in the rearview mirror, but neither can we move forward if we don't know where we've been. Really excellent summary. I'll mention, you'll notice there are 18 principles I would invite you to look at later. Just look up Aleph and you can read their 18 principles. But I also will mention the Four Worlds Judaism, which hopefully you've heard me talk about now. It's based on this Kabbalistic model of there being four worlds. And so the Jewish Renewal movement includes that as an essential framework for how they operate. Let's see if there's anything else I want to share with you here. No, I think that's pretty good. So let's see what else. There's so many questions. I guess one question might be, if I come to identify myself as a Jewish renewal rabbi, is that going to change who I am or how I serve as a rabbi? And I'm not so sure. I don't think it would change me in all that noticeable way, because I've kind of been in that space already for a long time. I've always considered myself to be on the fringe of the Jewish renewal movement. And so now I think it's time. Maybe I'm about 20 years late in my career, but it's time for me to really to enter that stream and to identify myself with those colleagues. You know, I think there's something about naming who you are, and the people with whom you share values. And you know, I'm ordained as a Reform rabbi, and I know and serve people in all different denominations and people who are not religious at all. But I think when I reflect deeply on my belief system and my values, I think they fall within the realm of Jewish renewal, probably more so than any other movement or denomination. How would it change our community? You know, that's a conversation for down the road, because I realize if we were to contemplate that question, you know, that would be a very a long discussion, one that would take place on the board level, and one that would probably be a couple of years away. I don't see any need to hurry into that decision, but I would hope that um, in my practice that you might notice a difference in a positive way, and that you might say, "Yeah, I really like that." So that's to be seen. Now, in a little while, I'll be introducing a guest who will join us, Rabbi David Zaslow, who was ordained as a renewal rabbi 30 years ago. He received smicha, ordination from Reb Zalman, and I think for all of that time, he has been serving as the rabbi of Havurah Shalom in Ashland, Oregon, just over the California border in Oregon, not far from Shasta. It's a beautiful community, and I know he's planning to retire, and they've just hired a young female renewal rabbi. I forget her name, Rachel Goldman, maybe Goldberg, I'm not sure. But she's great. And so I think he's really happy to be handing over the reins to her. But before we welcome him, and he can, I think it'll be an opportunity to ask him a lot of questions, why he chose renewal, the renewal movement, and what it's been like for him. Let me throw it out there. I think it's rather than me lecturing, I think it would be really good for me to hear from a few of you. If you have any questions, I would be really happy to respond or just hear what thoughts you might be having at the moment. Anyone care to share or offer something? Wendy and REA, please.
Thank you, Rabbi Moshe. Whoops. Let me unmute.
I can, yeah, you're good. I can lower your hand.
Okay, you can see me. You can lower my hand. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You know, I was going to ask you, where's Rabbi David Zaslow? So thank you for asking my question. You know, I was interviewing Reb Zalman about, I don't know, 20 some odd years ago for my book, Holy Beggars. And I was asking him that same question, what is Jewish renewal? And what he said at that time was very simple. He was saying, we learn, on the one hand, we learn what they were doing in those days with their technology for the transformation of consciousness. And their technology, you know, was animal sacrifices, right? But then he said, if we're going to be Jewish renewal, we have to ask ourselves, how do we do that same transformation of consciousness with our culture, with our technology today? So for him, it was both. I've got to learn what our grandparents, what our ancestors did, and then I got to get creative and do it in the way that works today. And he had this phrase, break the safer barrier. He said, if you're going to be Jewish renewal, it's not just doing your own thing. You got to learn how to relate to the texts. You break the safer barrier. You give yourself some kind of access to Torah.
Yeah, safer.
Then you got to get creative and do it in a way which works with technology today. That was what Reb Zalman told me.
Yeah. Safer, by the way, is a Hebrew word for book and, text, Hebrew text. Yeah, he said that to me as well. I need to do that. And I tried. I'm still working at it. Thank you, Aryeh. Any other comments, questions? I saw Avi Noam put a good question in the chat. I can respond to that if there's no one else that has an eager question here. Vaughn, go ahead.
Well, go ahead and speak to Avi Noam's question first and then me.
Okay. All right. As you all probably know, I was a spiritual seeker since I was a teenager, and I eventually found my way back to Judaism. And it was through Rabbi Lawrence Kushner and his book that was able to prove to me that Judaism was actually a spiritual tradition, which was really important to me. And I decided I wanted to pursue spirituality in my own tradition because I had the sense that it was woven into my DNA. And becoming a Buddhist or a Hindu just didn't seem completely authentic to me. And so I began reading everything I could get my hands on and decided I would really want to immerse myself in that subject. And felt the best way was to go to rabbinical school. Kind of a crazy idea, and the fact that I was accepted is even harder to believe. But I got through and learned a lot. My learning curve was very steep. And in the past, 25, close to 30 years, I've been serving now different communities and still learning a lot. And I still find that, spirituality may not be important to everybody, and, that's totally fine. But it is to me. And um, and but traditional Judaism believes that only, that's only the only true way. Religions tend to have that complex that, they are the only truth, the only way. But what Reb Zalman calls deep ecumenism, understanding that the truth can be found in many different spiritual traditions. So that was really essential to me. And then, the other, values that I came to embrace, egalitarianism, that women are equal and should be rabbis just as much as men, and that people should be free to choose their gender and gender preference and all of these values that would be not acceptable in a more traditional worldview. So I find the Jewish Renewal brings these together. So does the Reform movement in many ways, but I think Renewal goes even deeper. It's hard for me to put into words. I really have to think about that. But Vaughn, let me go ahead and you could share what you had, question or comment.
I was wondering, maybe Wendy and Aryeh could answer this, but how being Renewal might change our practices, our minhag, because it sounds like it harks back to the tradition a lot, and we don't expect that at CJC. It's up to individual people and families whether they keep the Sabbath, keep kashrut, or keep a lot of those kinds of laws. And it seems more like Reform when I was growing up, that we pay more attention to the ethical laws.
Do you want me to respond, Moshe?
Yeah, go ahead.
So thanks, Vaughn. Sticking with Reb Zalman's language, it's about the transformation of consciousness. If on the one hand you're interested in, just being with community, that's one thing. If you're interested in transforming consciousness, that's where renewal comes in. Reb Zalman's best friend, Reb Shlomo, said, you don't have to do all the mitzvahs. Pick one mitzvah. Maybe your mitzvah is Shabbos, right? Maybe your mitzvah is giving to the poor. Pick one mitzvah and go with that. So, not having been that immersed in CJC, but I would say that if CJC is interested in pursuing a path of offering people support for transforming consciousness to a more God-centered kind of consciousness, a more enlightened consciousness, then Jewish Renewal could be an approach to that.
Thank you for that. Yes, well said. I would also add that I'm really happy with the fact that our congregation has this model of the 4 Havurot, because I think Jewish Renewal is mostly of interest to people who are interested in spirituality, or I might say the members of the spirituality Havurah. It may not impact the other Havurot all that much. Because I think, our family Havurah is just doing great, and I don't want much to change with that. And our community Havurah, with the activity, with the community building within CJC and our interface with the broader community outside it's going great. And adult learning, we have all kinds of really interesting programs that are not necessarily related to Jewish spirituality. So that's why I think in some ways it might not change our community, but it could. I think it could deepen and enrich the spirituality Havurah. Any other comments, questions? And then I bet Rabbi David is going to join us. Jerry.
I think that the Musar movement is a good vehicle for beginning or to use as part of that pathway.
Great. You want to say any more about that?
Well, in trying to become a mensch and working on, finding balance means deeper personal, diving into personal in my own person. And then what is that relationship with what I believe in, a higher power or God, or being in the presence of something that is more than I have, and that I know that it exists, but I don't see it. So it's just been a good vehicle for me to look a little closer and in depth, but with a feeling of there's more to this. There's more than what I'm just studying to be better or finding balance. There's something much deeper and spiritual, more holy, I guess, is what I want to say.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, Jerry, because I think the Musar practice that we've done as a community, which I introduced about, 4, maybe 5 years ago, I think that's been a great success and has really enriched our community, our relationships. There are some Musar groups that are still going, meeting weekly to this day. I'm really happy about that. But I sensed that for me, there's got to be more than just striving to be a good person. I think there's a spiritual component to that I think I wasn't able to find as much in the Musar literature. Even though Musar and Hasidism and Kabbalah, they're all very intricately connected, but I'm ready to explore the more spiritual dimensions, and I think some of you might be as well. Let's see. So I've got Rabbi David. Yes. Zoom. Yes, the Zoom. Okay. Oh, here he is. Okay. So we'll welcome him. And I gave him a bit of an introduction. But let's see what Paul has to say. Let's see. Yeah. Great. Well, a really good question, Paul. So we'll explore that. But let me say hello to Rabbi David. Is he there? Oh, there he is. Okay. I'm going to spotlight you, Reb David, and say hello. I gave you a brief introduction to everyone and said that you're the rabbi of Havurah Shalom in Ashland, Oregon. You were ordained 30 years ago. From Reb Zalman, and I wonder if you'd be so kind as to tell us a little bit about your journey, and then we might have some more questions for you.
Well, I just turned 77, so it's a long journey, but let's put it this way. It started in Brooklyn, New York. It developed in Ebbets Field as a Brooklyn Dodger fan. I moved to Ashland, Oregon in 1970 and got my master's degree in creative writing. And I worked as a poet in the schools for the under grants from the National Endowment for the Arts. And then I opened up a nightclub, believe it or not, in the late 70s and 80s, a jazz club. And I went from jazz to Jews. So in the late 90s, I started studying with Reb Zalman and was in a 7-year journey and got ordained in 1995. And the founder, it's not Havurah Shalom, it's Havurah Shir Hadash, that R.E.A. Hirschfield, Oliver Shalom, started. He moved up to Portland and started another franchise, so to speak, of Pnei Or. And I became the rabbi here at 45 years old and been the rabbi since then. I'm retiring this year, so to speak, if retirement is really, it's not a great word, but I'm in a transition. We're hiring an incredible young woman, grew up in Chicago, and she moved to Israel 6 years ago, and she got ordained last year. And so here I am. I do a lot of interfaith work, especially with for Christians to understand Judaism, and also for Jews to understand Christianity, to lessen the surface tension between the two faith traditions. So that standing on one foot is sort of my journey.
Thank you for that. I hope you know that we have Wendy Burke and R.A. Cooper. God, my
Cooperstein.
name.
Smith.
Cooper Smith, man.
Cooper Smith, I'm sorry.
They're elders in our community, and oh my God, I can't believe I just forgot his last name. But I'm sure longtime friends of yours. Also, Paulette Eisen is here. I don't know if you know Paulette, but she knew Reb Aryeh, and and a few others here have connections in the Renewal community. In fact, I also want to mention some of you have seen me hold with these little wooden discs that I have that I spoke about in my High Holy Day sermon recently. It says based on a story about Reb Simcha Bunim about two slips of paper in his pocket. So you could just carry one wooden disc that has something on each side. And Reb David created those, and I bought them from him. There
I
it
know
is.
the lighting is terrible.
There it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I bought a bunch of those about 5 years ago at the.
One side said, Simcha Bunim said, you should carry these in your pockets. One said, and when you're feeling really uppity about yourself, you read the side that says, I'm just dust and ashes. Nochi afer v'afer. And the other side says, when you're really feeling down, you read the other side, which says the world was created for me. So it's a great token that I carry around.
So here's a couple questions. It's really premature for me to be asking this question on behalf of my congregation, but I'm leaning toward becoming a renewal rabbi. I'm not sure there's much of a formal process other than joining the association, but just identifying myself in that way. And
Right.
I'll be attending the Ohala conference starting Sunday. You're not going to be there by any chance, are you?
No, I wish I was. I really made a mistake and tried to register too late before I had other obligations. So I wish I was going to. I'm glad you're going to be there. That's great. In fact, you'll meet Rabbi Rachel Goldberg, who's going to be my successor here in Ashland.
Terrific. Good. So anyway, on behalf of the congregation, what would it mean for a congregation or a community to consider itself a renewal community?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I know Reb Zalman, Alav Hashalom, may rest in peace, always fought against the idea of it becoming a denomination. He really liked the idea of a movement, meaning it's just one of many waves of energetic movements within Judaism, where a denomination is kind of solidifies itself around a particular theology. But I do look, and I know Wendy and Aryeh can, kind of agree with this notion that there is definitely a notion in renewal. It's very neo-Hasidic, meaning the idea that God is immanent in the world, that God is part of all of us, the concept of panentheism, that God is in everything, and the whole Kabbalistic notion of four worlds and the energy centers within the body. They're kind of part and parcel to renewal Judaism. So it's not like you have to have a certification to be a renewal rabbi, but if you've got the idea that there's different realms, different worlds, and that God is this immanent force within all things, then you're kind of in the renewal mode of consciousness.
Is it possible for someone who might be agnostic or even atheist to still have some connection to the renewal community?
Well, it's sort of like Reb Zalman used to tell the story where somebody came up to him, and I get this all the time. People say to me, well, they came to Reb Zalman and said, I don't believe in God. And Reb Zalman said, tell me why. He said, well, the idea of a God up in heaven ruling everybody, this man, this white guy with a long white beard, I can't believe in that God. Reb Zalman says, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in that God either. So, it's I know this sounds silly. I'm not being, trying to make too much of a joke, but I sort of I don't believe in atheists. I just think if I sit down with an agnostic or an atheist, I think it just depends how you define or understand the nature of divinity. Now, once you start defining God and nature as the same, that God manifests his, her, itself through nature, through the wind, the earth, the sky, the waters, then suddenly there's nothing to believe in. You're experiencing God at every moment. And once you sense you're experiencing God at every moment,
I think that's
you know, you can be an atheist, so to speak, not believe in a limited definition of God, but you can't be in, you can really make a good argument that God and nature are really one in Judaism.
Tell me about your community. Do you have what's the age? I mean, is it diverse in terms of ages? You have a lot of children, or what's the demographic of your community?
Absolutely. Wendy, did you have a question first? I think Wendy was going to jump in there, if that's okay, Rabbi.
Yeah, I was struggling a little bit, Reb Moshe, when you were trying to define renewal and what it would mean to the congregation. But Reb David, you just came up with it because Jewish renewal is very experiential. And I guess if I were to say how is that, I don't like to say how is it different, but to participate in renewal, it's the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Judaism is an experiential religion. It's again, it's not believing in God. Do you experiencing? Do you if I'm doing counseling and someone says, "Well, I don't believe in God," what do you experience? Do you ever experience oneness with a tree, or oneness with the wind, or a sense of deep interconnection? I approach it kind of from the side door rather than the front door, because the front door is God is up there, we're down here, we pray to God, rather than God existing through us. That these are God's eyes, these are God's ears. That I'm a manifestation of God like everybody else is, and we want to make our day. Reb Zalman used to say, "Okay, God." In the morning, we said his prayers of gratitude, Modeh ani lefanecha, and then he would say, "Okay, God, please use this mouth and use these eyes and use this ears, and let me be the best Zalman I can be today."
Nice.
All right.
Tell me about the demographics of your community.
Well, our community, we're in Ashland, Oregon, and so we're a small community. I would say at our peak about 10 years ago, before the economic meltdown in 2008, we had about 150 families. And then it just became difficult to live here, to make a living here. The town is 22,000 people, and we lost a lot of our elders. So we're about 100 families. We're a small community. And very dedicated to the teachings of Reb Shlomo and Reb Zalman and Reb Aryeh and Reb Shefa Gold and all the other Hana Tiferet Siegel, all the other incredible rabbis ordained in this movement. Right now, I would say we're lacking young families. We have a very small Hebrew school. We used to have a very large Hebrew school, and it's nothing personal to us. The Reconstructionist shul up the street, the rabbi there is a really wonderful colleague of mine. They used to have 70 kids, now they're down to 30. We used to have 30 kids, now we're down to 10 or 12. So it's just the demographics of our region. It's definitely an aging community or an eldering community, and we're trying to really build it up. And that's why I think it's very exciting for us to have Rabbi Rachel, because we're 40 years old as a community, Rabbi Moshe. And so it's exciting to us to not only have a woman, but a young woman, right? Somebody who's got 10 times more energy than I have. And so we're really hoping the demographic that we want to build is more, young families coming into the community.
Nice. Now, you mentioned there's a Reconstructionist synagogue here.
Yes.
How does a Jewish Renewal synagogue or community differ from a Reconstructionist community?
You're asking great questions, of course. These things are hard to define because Rabbi Julie Benioff, who's the Reconstructionist rabbi, has also got her ordination as a spiritual counselor from Renewal. Her husband is a cantor and also got his ordination from Renewal. So there's less of a difference between us. You might say I'm Reconstructionist light and she's Renewal light. We overlap in a lot of ways. We all sing Shefa Gold chants. We all sing Hana Tiferet songs and Reb Aryeh songs. But in general, of course, the joke used to be is how how does a Reconstructionist define God? I mean, address God? And the answer was, to whom it may concern. So, in old Reconstructionism, God was, was this force, this out there force. It was more of a deistic connection to God, where, again, I'm going back to the core of Renewal, which it's more theistic, that God is immanent in all things, that God is immanent in everybody in this class here, and immanent in the trees and the wind, that God exists through the natural world. So in that way, you can compare us to any Reform or Reconstructionist shul, and you'll find that we're pretty much a pedigree Renewal community, neo-Hasidic, seeing God in all things.
Mm-hmm. And are there some members of your community who are not all that interested in spirituality?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, there's some people in every community who are more the intellectual kind and want to come to the Torah studies that we do on Tuesdays, and some that are more ecstatic kind. We have people who lead sacred movement, to the davening. So the nice diversity is that we have our mystics and we have our rationalists, and there's room for everybody in our community. But I'd say the core of people have a connection to divinity, even if they don't use the word God. And certainly use prayer as a mechanism to connect their own selves to that sense of the divine. Moshe, I mean, Aryeh, did you have your hand up there? I see a hand up, so you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I did. On the subject of younger people in Jewish Renewal, the question in my mind is, how does that connection happen? Back in the days in the 70s, when the Aquarian Minyan was starting, Reb Zalman posed a challenge to the Aquarian Minyan. And he said, are you going to be a one-generation community? And if not, how are you going to do it? Is Jewish Renewal going to be a one-generation movement?
That's right.
What I've seen in our experience and others is that a lot of our communities are, we were younger 50 years ago, and now we're older. What does Jewish Renewal have to offer to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old or a bar bat mitzvah or a 15-year-old that's special for them?
It's really that, Aryeh, that's just such an important question for all of us in conservative, Reconstructionist, Renewal, Reform Judaism to really be asking. But Zalman's question for sure, is this a one-generation movement? We're going to find out very soon, Rabbi Moshe. We're going to see very soon. As I retire, will Rabbi Goldberg be able to carry it on? As the Aquarian Minyan, which is also an aging and eldering community, is it going to be younger people to be able to carry it on? And we don't know the answer. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see what God has to bring. I really think, at least in our community here, I think we're going to go at least another generation. And then when Rabbi Rachel retires in 40 years, we'll see what happens. But it's a pretty legitimate question, because unless we can make spirituality, ruchaniyut, mitzvot, spiritual practices, tefillah, prayer, a sense of the divine, unless we can make it real, it's just not going to last. It's like, I don't need this. I get my I get my Hinduism through yoga. I get my Buddhism through my meditation. I just don't need to be struggling with all that text of Hebrew when I can get the goodies elsewhere. So I think Aryeh, you're asking the ultimate question here. How are we going to make it into the next generation? I mean, my general answer, I'll give you a little anecdote. I have a woman who's joined I've been doing this class on Tuesdays at noon, Rabbi Moshe, since 1991, right? And we have people, obviously, who've been there a long time, and some people go in and go out. So there's a woman who's a professor of English in Canada, joined our class, and she was startled, in a good way, at how people were disagreeing with me. I was making a presentation on Hebraic consciousness, Hebraic thinking, breaking down the binary of this or that and seeing sadness and joy as interrelated together, nighttime and daytime as being integrated into a singularity. And people were disagreeing with various things I was saying. And she comes from a very Catholic tradition where when the priest speaks, you just don't disagree. And in Judaism, of course, we know when the rabbi speaks, you have to disagree, right? It's not a disagreement. It's this pushback, this ezer kenegdo to each other. We strengthen each other. I think one of the great things in Judaism is we train our next generation to be great critical thinkers. Critical thinking, I think, is one of the great aspects of Judaism. Now, many great critical thinkers then leave Judaism and bring it into the world and create great inventions and great innovations and win Pulitzer Prizes and Nobel Prizes for what they're doing. I think my job is to take the spirituality and to link it to that critical thinking is a spiritual practice. That study is not just intellectual, but it opens your heart to the sense of the divine being spoken through the words of Torah or through the words of Talmud, whatever we're doing. So Rabbi Moshe, so as you enter, you're going to find out next week if you're renewal or not. If you're having a great time and really a great experience, which I have a feeling you will, you can say, yeah, I'm part of this wave. I really part of the wave of body, heart, mind, and soul are all connected together.
Nice. Well, I've actually been to a couple of these conferences before, so
Oh, you have? Okay.
I'm comfortable there. So I'm really proud of our little community here on the coast side. We're growing. We've got a lot of families with young kids, and I don't want any of that to change. And I just wanted to continue on this really positive trajectory. So is it, I think most people have this stereotype of the Jewish Renewal community as the, crunchy, hippie kind of type of community, and maybe that's true for many congregations or communities. But would you say that there are other renewal communities that are not really of that type?
Yeah, within a range. I mean, we're on some kind of spectrum, right? Definitely, when you go to the Jewish Renewal community in London, it's definitely got that more intellectual flavor of the mind as you have in English, as you have in England. When you go to the Aquarian Minion, you're definitely going to have that '60s flavor of that wonderful, Berkeley hippie Oakland Revolution. You come to a place like ours in Ashland, and maybe it's a little bit in between. So there's definitely I consider myself a neo chassid, a post neo hippie myself. In other words, when I saw the Bob Dylan movie, I don't know if anybody's seen that, but my wife and I sat there crying, half the time. So I'm proud to be from that generation of the '60s that helped usher in, as Aryeh and Wendy know, when we first met Shlomo, Carlbach, and Zalman, it was unbelievable because, the Judaism I grew up with in an Orthodox shul had some great things, great elements to it, but I didn't know, I didn't understand any of it. I was standing next to men who had numbers on their arms, and at 13, I was already their height, and they were under their taluses and they were crying. And I'm reading the Hebrew book, and I read fluently, but I didn't understand most of it. And I knew there was something going on with these guys next to me. I knew those tears that they were shedding had some meaning. But I had to leave Judaism at 18 or 19, and I did my responsible duty as a child of the '60s. And, I went to Native American, communities, and I went to Hinduism and Buddhism. And I didn't return till I was in my late 30s. I think for me to go out and then come back was a very important part of my journey.
Yeah, I think that's
And I see Wendy and Aryeh are shaking their heads. So,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And we were talking about young people, at least in the Bay Area, where I tend to see young people, it'd be like in Wilderness Torah or Urban Adamah. So I think that's one thing that CJC can, there's so much natural beauty around here. And so things like earth-based Judaism, which is very much a part of Jewish Renewal, I think that's where, at least around here, I don't know if that's what you see also, Reb David, but that's where
I,
young
I,
people hanging out. I'm the
yeah,
oldest
I,
whenever I go to one of their classes.
I think I think the sense of the right to explore, to experiment. Zalman used to call Judaism, Renewal Judaism, the research and development center of Judaism. He didn't want it to become a denomination. He wanted us to experiment and fail, experiment again and fail, experiment again, and ooh, this seemed to work, this didn't work. The right, so to speak, as us as rabbis, Rabbi Moshe, to experiment and explore, I think is, nothing shocks my congregation. I don't do anything totally out of the box, but I push boundaries. And Rabbi Rachel's she's going to push boundaries even further. And I think that's the part of it is not only to bring in the youth through to Wilderness Torah, but also to see, in many of our communities, we have people in Jewish Renewal, as you know, Rabbi Moshe, I'm sure, people who are using sacred movement and are, so to speak, sacred dance as part of the davening. And I grew up with that in its own Orthodox way, where the men would sway and they would move back and forth. In other words, it was a sacred choreography that I never let go of. I love that, right? But you go to some synagogues and everybody's sitting there in ties and jackets, and it's all very polite and wonderful. And I don't really want to criticize that. I think that's got its place too, right? But if somebody leapt up and started dancing, it would be shocking. If you go to an Aquarian Minion gathering, and if somebody didn't get up and start dancing, it would be shocking. And in our community, Moshe, it's kind of both. We have people who want to just sit there and they don't want to leap up and dance. And then we have our core of mostly women, but women and guys will make a big daisy chain and, start dancing every time we sing Micha Mocha.
Nice. I heard Reb Zalman use this analogy. You know what it's like to eat an apple right off a tree in New England. And then, the kind of apple you buy in the supermarket, it's been, washed and waxed and, refrigerated and everything. So it loses something. And he says that davening is like eating that fresh apple right off the tree, whereas
Wow.
synagogues, it's kind of been processed and, that's what you get. But
Right, right. Exactly. I think if you came to our shul, if anybody here came to our shul, I hope you would feel the permission to do whatever in God's name you want. Just sit there and be, or get up and dance, or chant a little bit louder, or harmonize with the choir, or it's that kind of permission that I think is that is very, 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 very important.
yeah.
You know,
Here's also, though, not a lot of folks in our community are really service-going people, but we do have a lot that are committed to climate justice, social
right.
justice. Tell me how that factors into your community.
It's all part of it. It's every community. One community is social justice oriented. Another community is very, mystically Kabbalistic oriented. And a third community is very davening oriented. So it's a question of having balance, at least in my community here. We have a Tuesday class, which is a Torah study that's been going on for 35 years. And we do some chanting at first, and then we do some study, and then we do some interaction. So that I think that satisfies a lot of the intellectual curiosity. We bring in guest speakers. We try to do a Shabbaton or two every year, whether it's Art Green or Estelle Frankel, or Reb Zalman came here every year from 2005 till his passing. That stimulates everything, because Reb Zalman would give these great talks that appeal to the mind, but the services that we co-created, opened up the heart. So I think communities, for me, I love our community here because we have a little bit of everything.
And tell me about the role of music, because we have a few people on this call tonight who are members of our musical ensemble. And we've been really getting into that lately. It's just Jewish music is just a way of really going deep, getting high, however you want to describe it. It's really, we're discovering it's really essential to.
Yeah, let me just grab my guitar right here and just sort of do a little demo, right? So if I say the word shalom 4 times, it's wonderful, right? Let me do this. Do that. Everybody take a clearing breath.
Hey, I don't know if you're able to turn original sound on, but that way.
I am habituated to that now. Yes, I turned it on. But I'm just going to say the words now, right? I'm going to do it in 3 or 4 different ways. So the first one is shalom 4 times. Shalom. 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 Now watch what happens. This is a Reb Shlomo move. Shalom. 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 Feel the difference? One is just saying the words. The other one has an underpinning, a force field of the music. Third way. It's also Shlomo's melody. Shalom. 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 So we have these different modalities. One beautiful thing in our tradition in Judaism in general is we don't read prayers, we sing prayers. We don't read Torah. We say we're reading Torah, but we're singing Torah. And so, to me, a good service has to have a lot of singing. It has to have a lot of melody. Reb Zalman used to do these imitations, so to speak, of the old Magidim, the Magid, the preacher of old in Eastern Europe. They didn't preach like I'm speaking now, Rabbi Moshe. They would speak with a melody, and they would share some little bit of Torah while using melody in their words. And when we heard Reb Shlomo do that in the 60s and 70s, and Reb Zalman do that, it suddenly opened up our hearts. We realized we needed more music. We realized we needed more melody. And in that way, I felt lucky. I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue in Brooklyn, New York, and the musicality was just profound. The individualism, it was not egalitarian, right? The women were upstairs, the men were downstairs. But what was great is that, let's say I'm sitting next to Moshe on one side and Aryeh on the other side, and he'd be in the middle of the V'ahavta, I'd be at the end of the V'ahavta, and Moshe you'd be already, somewhere else in the prayer book. We're all at different pages, and we come together at certain moments, but there's this powerful individual way of being with each other in this collective called the evening service or the morning service. And I hope in our community, that's my goal, is always to retrieve that sense of individuality. This is for you, this service. It's not serving, let's all behave the same way, but let's all express ourselves toward the divine in some way that really brings us to a higher place. And I think music is the key. Music is the key. And movement. Music and movement.
Yeah.
And liturgy. In other words, if you have a common liturgy and we have melody and we have movement, you got the great recipe.
Excellent. Gosh, I had another question that was on the tip of my tongue, but it escaped me. But I'm wondering if anyone else on the call has a question they'd like to ask.
Yeah, please. I'm just picking on Aryeh and Wendy because they're my friends. But if anybody else has a question, just unmute yourself, and I'd be glad to respond.
I did hear a story from a colleague who was saying that when she went to synagogue when she was very young and went with her father, she got to stand in the men's section. This was an Orthodox shul, of course. And he was standing there, holding his prayer book, and she was standing next to him. And there was a boy that walked up, very friendly, that came over and took the book out of her father's hand, turned it over, and gave it back to him. Obviously, her father didn't know, couldn't read Hebrew and didn't know what he was reading.
Oh, wow, wow. That reminds me of a tale Reb Zalman told. He said, in the old yeshivas in the 1800s, 1700s, where they didn't have sidurs for everybody, or they would all study so if I was the Rebbe reading from the text, and you were standing opposite me, you would learn your Hebrew. You would learn your Hebrew upside down, and Reb Aryeh is standing next to me on my right side, so he would learn it at a 90-degree angle. So we all have our different ways of reading.
So
I have a question about in Renewal. When it comes to using and relating to the Torah, how does that fit in? Is that a regular part? I've been to church, and I will hear a sermon, and how does that work within, if at all, within the Jewish context?
So clarify it a little bit more, Paulette. You mean, do we read from Torah and have aliyot to call people up to Torah?
No, not reading the Torah, interpreting the Torah, or giving a talk about a passage, how it's relating to our lives, how to find meaning in it, using it as a vehicle to align and connect.
Thank you. That's a great question. I would say, just again, using that expression, standing on one foot, in a very simplistic way, that what we gained from the Kabbalists and the Hasidic movement is the idea that when the Torah is speaking about Moses on Mount Sinai, it's not just a historical event, but I also have an inner Moses and an inner Sinai inside of me. So everything in the Torah, the Cain and Abel, when Cain kills his brother Abel, what part of me has been killed by the other part of me? What part of me survives? In other words, I would say a Jungian analysis of the Torah and a renewal analysis of the Torah are very similar. They're very, very parallel. In other words, we're looking not just at the historical story, but how they relate to my own life. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but there's 4 levels of understanding. And so definitely Jewish Renewal applies those 4 levels of understanding when I'm giving a sermon, so to speak, a Devar Torah, a talk. I try to take the Torah portion. So if I'm talking about Joseph and in Egypt and revealing himself to his brothers, my goal is to say, what part of ourselves have been hidden, have been so assimilated that we don't even look Jewish anymore? We've cut our hair and shaved our beards, and we want to look like everybody else. What part of ourselves needs to reveal itself to our own brothers? And so, in other words, I'm taking the Joseph story and making it pertinent and into my own life. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so. So would that be typical, at a Shabbat service? Would it be typical? I would imagine it's typical in the holidays, in doing it at that point. But is it just part of the, I'm kind of curious as to what a typical renewal service is, what that template is.
Thank you. It's a great question. And of course, experiencing it is much better than listening to me talk about it, right? So go to a pedigree renewal shul and see what it feels like. See what Rabbi Moshe does in his services, or what happens at the Aquarian Minyan. And definitely in our services, Paulette, what I'm explaining to you is happening all the time. My whole notion of Torah and Talmud is to take the past and make it present, to make my presence here connection to my ancestors in a living way, that the Torah is speaking to me about me. So there's kind of this mystical element. I don't mean like just a woo-woo element, but this mystical element that, God, this Torah it's about my life. you know? I mean, we're about to go into the book of Exodus soon. So it's like preparing ourselves for the season coming on. I don't know what's happening down where you are, but we're already seeing more light. You know, we've passed the solstice. Hanukkah is over. There's already more light every day. And so now we're going to study about the Exodus, about getting out of our constrained places. That's not a coincidence that the Torah is aligned in a certain way to the seasons themselves, that the end of the Torah is always at the end of the year during the harvest. Something ends, something begins. So I would say, Paulette, it's like Eitz Chaim Hi Lamacha Zikaba. She is a tree of life when we hold fast to her. That the Torah is our tree of life, and that it relates to everything that we do because we see ourselves in the Torah.
We'll be
Thank you.
thank you. We'll be continuing next week. We'll have some more questions, and we'll also have a different guest coming to visit. You probably know Rabbi Victor Gross.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely.
Tell us about
Yeah.
him, just so we can be excited about next week.
Now you're going to be. Are you going to the Ohala in
Yeah,
person?
so I'll be zooming from there.
Oh, that's great. And where are you located now, Rabbi Moshe? Where are you?
Half Moon Bay, California, just south of San Francisco.
Okay, that's what I thought. Great, great. Well, I know all of our prayers are for Southern California, but for all of us on the West Coast, this climate change it's going to be more and more. God forbid. I hope I'm saying something foolish, but I'm really worried about it getting more and more catastrophic. You know, it's just crazy. The whole, not only the West Coast, but the Southwest, and so it's sort of like our prayers are with Southern California for sure now, but it's like we need more than prayers, and so that when I think if we see the earth as also part of our Torah, Paulette, that it's not just a scroll called the Torah, but the whole, we're all part of Torah, we're all little letters of the Torah. And so I really pray for an awakened consciousness in our nation and in the world, about the horrors of climate change that are going to be taking place.
Thank you for that.
Rabbi Moshe, thanks for inviting me. It's really been an honor.
Yeah, I appreciate your insights and just, being candid about your experience and your community.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for the lighting. I've never figured out in the nighttime how to get this lighting right. You guys look all crisp and clear, and I look like I'm in sort of, kind of a strange darkness.
Fine. Well, we hope that all is well up there in Ashland and with your community, and we'll stay in touch. I think we'll probably have a connection that continues.
I hope so, Moshe. That's great. It's wonderful to meet you, and we're going to be having a Shabbaton in honor of Reb Zalman when Rachel Goldberg arrives here. We want to initiate her into our community, so we're going to be inviting everybody from the Bay Area and Portland and Seattle up north, to come for the Shabbaton. So I'll let you know about it, and maybe you could get the word out in your community. Some of you might want to come.
Fantastic. We'll do that. Okay, well, we'll call it now, but folks can stick around if they want to chat. I'll stay on, and maybe you've got some questions that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, but this will be a conversation that's ongoing, and I hope you all, will do a little reading and listen to some of the podcasts or watch some of the videos that might be related to what we've been talking about. But there's a lot of really great stuff out there. And
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, David. Wonderful to have you.
Thanks, Paulette.
Thank you, Reb David. Thank you, Reb Moshe.
Great.
Thanks, Reb Aryeh.
Thanks, Avinon. Yeah.
Paulette Eisen, are you related to Ephraim Eisen?
Yes. I mean, I was his wife, his first wife.
Unbelievable. Oh, it's wonderful to meet you like this. This is wild. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's good to see you again. And
I know we've met. Okay, we have
Yes.
met. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. In Ashland.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I forgot exactly. Did you come to visit Ephraim, or did you come to a?
Well, yes, I was visiting Ephraim, and I went to a couple of services with Aryeh Hirschfeld.
Oh, great, great.
So
Great.
yeah.
Good. It's nice to renew connection to you, Paula.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Very nice.
Reb David, you're talking about a Shabbaton in honor of Reb Zalman. You used to, I'm remembering where you used to give a Shabbaton when Reb Zalman was with us in the body every single year. And
Yeah.
Wendy and I would go. And you're talking about a renewal community is creatively pushing the boundaries. For us, the one that stands out is when you also had Ibrahim Baba and Reb Zalman there. Ibrahim is a tall black man who is a Sufi sheikh and is also a renewal rabbi. And he and Reb Zalman were Reb David's guests this particular Shabbaton. So imagine the two of them standing there, the Sufi sheikh and Reb Zalman, and they're leading a prayer service together. And Reb Zalman is, I think, doing the Psalms. He's doing Hallel, da da da, da 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 da, da 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 da. And Ibrahim is doing Allah, Allah, Allah. And could you imagine in the synagogue, a bunch of Jews were all going around in the circle, Allah, Allah. And I had this scary vision that all of the Sufi sheikhs were going to come in and see the Jews doing this and say, how could you be doing this? And they'd drag us off. And then the rabbis would be coming in and they'd be saying, how could you be doing this? They'd drag us off. But the truth is, because you were able to host this totally out of the box event, I think we all grew spiritually from that prayer service.
It was pretty incredible, Rabbi Moshe. This particular sheikh that Aryeh is referring to was really a brilliant, brilliant Sufi scholar. He was the dean of the Star Divinity School, I believe, in Berkeley, and the world really misses him terribly. He led what Aryeh is describing was an authentic zikr, where everybody was chanting, everybody was standing in a circle doing a zikr, and he was doing a traditional Arabic zikr, while Reb Zalman was interweaving Psalms of King David in Hebrew. I'm actually looking right now to see if I have a photograph of it that I can share. But it was an extraordinary experience. I think if you go on YouTube and put in Rabbi David Zaslow, Z-I-K-R, zikr, you'll actually find a video of exactly that time that Aryeh is describing. It was an extraordinary moment, and this was one of the things Reb Zalman used to love to do was break down boundaries between spiritual traditions and find, not to make them one, but to find where they overlapped. Not to say you should stop speaking Arabic and we'll stop speaking Hebrew and we'll all chant in English, but no, let's merge the Hebrew and the Arabic one on top of the other.
Nice. Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it here while you're hanging around. Thanks for reminding me of that, Aryeh. I can't seem to grab the picture, but just go Rabbi David Zaslow on YouTube, Z-I-K-R Zikr, and I think you'll see a really good video, a video of that. And if not, I'll send it to you, Moshe. I'll send you the link to it so people can see it.
Share that. Yeah. Hey, I've been reading the book by Bert Jacobson, Alav Shalom, Living in the Presence. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but a few of us in our community have been reading that. I know Philip has been pretty enthusiastic about it. Philip, anything you want to say about the book? What that's been like for you? You're on mute. Sorry about that.
I think, like you, Moshe, a lot of us who are spiritual seekers can really relate to his journey. Yeah. From being sort of involved with Judaism young, but not being a very satisfying spiritual tradition, and then moving away from it and coming back. And, I've gotten fascinated with the Baal Shem Tov and his life. As some of you know, for me, the real spiritual tradition that's affected me in Judaism is blowing the shofar. That connects me with the one. And through CJC, I've had the great privilege of being the Baal Tekiah for our community, but also getting much, much deeper into the practice of shofar itself. Of blowing the wailing sound that just is overpowering connection to the divinity. And that's getting me reconnected with Judaism in this interesting way. I think, renewal seems like a very powerful way to get reconnected with Judaism. And I think it would fit very well in our community, actually.
Yeah. Definitely the connection to the Baal Shem Tov. It's really powerful. I don't know how to explain that, and it seems to be almost like a lineage that maybe goes through Chabad and also goes through Reb Zalman. How would you of it?
Yeah, I would say I have a whole map, Moshe. If you remind me, I'll send it to you. That David Wolfblank, another sad Oliver Shalom, of the influences of renewal, very parallel with sort of like the reform or the progressive version of Chabad. We're definitely right out of that Chabad lineage in the more egalitarian, progressive way, of course. But definitely it's definitely a neo-Hasidic movement, and whether it's the blowing of the shofar is as powerful as prayer. It's as powerful as study, right? And so if Philip, if his expertise is going to be in the shofar, the mysticism of the shofar, and somebody else is in the power of music, and somebody else is in study, and we all come together, and it's a more powerful community that way.
May it be so.
Amen.
All right. Well, we'll call it here, everyone, but to be continued for sure. Thanks. I really appreciate your interest and your questions, and we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, thanks to all the rabbis. We really appreciate it.
Yes, very good.
Hey, thanks,
Thank you.
rabbis.
Before you go off, just make me a co-host for a second. I finally found the photo. I just want to share with you just for a second.
Go ahead. You should have the capability.
Everybody just hang around one more second. This is Ibrahim Baba with Reb Zalman at a Sunday morning service. You can see Reb Zalman is tefillin on, and there's Baba. Look at he's wearing his talis, right? And
Great shot.
It was a great moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great
I'm
shot.
glad you reminded me of that, Aryeh.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks again, Reb. And to be continued. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you. Take care. Lihitrot.
Everybody. Yep. Bye.